Have you ever wondered how artificial intelligence is helping solve medical problems? Or how medical research is making it easier to predict your genetic risks for disease? Hi, I'm Kathy Werzer. Tomorrow's Cure, a podcast from Mayo Clinic and PRX, is back for Season 2. Join me as I interview experts who are shaping the future of healthcare with groundbreaking advancements. What they describe may sound futuristic, but listen and you'll find out. Tomorrow's Cure is already here. Find it now wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Mayo Clinic Kids, a podcast from Mayo Clinic where we discuss the latest pediatric research and recommendations to help keep your kids laughing and thriving. I'm Dr. Angela Matkey, a pediatrician with Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. This episode, School Lunches. We all have memories of the cafeteria. So does my guest, Lori Russell.
I honestly don't remember a home-packed lunch in elementary school at all, which is, my mom would be ashamed to hear that probably, me saying that. But I do remember the grilled cheese and tomato soup in my elementary school. So good. Yeah. That's comfort food to me. I remember that meal. That was my day. I'm sure I brought lunch like every other day, but that grilled cheese, tomato soup was it for me. I still remember it. So yeah, that's my meal.
Grilled cheese and tomato soup was absolutely, it was like sold out. And then sometimes they'd have chicken noodle soup instead, and that was also a big hit. The one thing that I just couldn't do, and I feel like I'm going to get killed for saying this as a native Minnesotan, is tater tot hot dish.
I've never had it. I'm not from Minnesota, but I don't have the desire to.
It wasn't something I grew up eating either. And even though I'm from Minnesota, we had a lot of hot dishes, or if you're from Iowa, as my husband is, casseroles. But I just couldn't do the tater tot hot dish from school. It just made me gag. So school lunches bring up visceral memories, but the menu really varies from school to school. And in an ideal world, parents could pack healthy lunches for kids every day. But let's face it, that's time-consuming and expensive. There's nothing wrong with outsourcing lunch to the school cafeteria. And that's what caregivers of roughly 30 million kids in the U.S. do. But how well do schools meet the basic nutritional needs of students? And how can parents ensure their kids are getting a healthy meal, whether it's on a tray or in their lunchbox? This episode, we're talking with Lori Russell. Lori is a pediatric dietitian here at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. She's counseled many parents and kids on family nutrition and healthy eating habits. Lori, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
Lori, are you a parent? Do you have any school-age kids that are eligible for school lunches?
I am a parent. He's about to turn 3 next month, so he's in daycare, so he gets a lunch there, but not quite the school age.
So when he starts kindergarten, or maybe he'll do pre-K through the school district or something like that, will you let him eat school lunches, or will he be one of the cold lunch kids?
Hopefully he'll have a lot of input on what his palate is like and how, diverse he wants it to be. I'm sure if there is a meal that he really wants on that school menu, yeah, he will absolutely have the option to get that.
That's the same approach that we did, but honestly, probably by about last year, I was like, if you want cold lunches, you can pack them because you're old enough. It's your responsibility to look at the meal and the menu and help figure out if this is a meal that you want to eat at school or not. Because I think I've gotten so busy. I think I had maybe more energy is the best way to describe it when they were younger.
Well, when they're younger, you have to, right? You have to take on that responsibility. The 5-year-old probably shouldn't be packing their own lunch. They could assist.
Super inappropriate.
But, when they are 14 or whatever age, even younger than that, yeah, you can have some say. And it's a great way to learn about healthy habits and implement them for yourself. So that's awesome.
Lori, what kind of nutrients do school-age kids actually need from their lunches? Sometimes I'll hear kids having one food group, and that's it. What, in an ideal setting, should children be getting?
I mean, ideally, you'd be getting as many nutrients as you can from every meal, right? The more variety of foods, the more nutrients. The biggest thing, though, from school lunch is calories and that they're being fed. So that school lunch is providing energy for a growing body, both mentally and physically. And these kids need to eat food to get through the day, to be able to do their homework, to play sports and recess and interact correctly with their peers. Outside of that, the more diverse foods and the, higher quality foods, sure, like the whole grains, right? We're getting fiber, we're getting B vitamins, that's good for energy. So the more variety we can get, the more nutrients overall we're going to pack into that mealtime.
How do the needs of what children need during their lunchtime differ from adults?
I would say the biggest difference, and a lot of parents get hung up on protein because as adults, we all think like protein, right?
Right.
The younger a child is, the less protein they need. Protein needs are generally low. They increase as we age. So as you get into that high school, you're seeing more adult level. So what we're looking at more is like those whole grains, the fruits, the vegetables. I think that's most important.
One thing I really like about our school is that you can come in and eat lunch with your kid anytime, and you can pay to have the hot lunch. Tortellini, salad, green beans, milk, and a breadstick, I think is what I remember like the most recent meal I had. And it was actually really good. And I was impressed at the number of kids I saw eating salad.
A lot of them are very friendly about taking the salad. And I think sometimes that is more appealing than maybe the cooked vegetable that's being offered.
Right.
But it's awesome that it's being offered, it's being consumed, and that's the main point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I've been impressed with is how they'll have local produce that are added to the lunches during spring and fall time, especially, when harvest is coming in. So kids get to try things that maybe they wouldn't have been able to try before, like kohlrabi or kale. But one of the most influential things, I think, that impacts children's willingness to try new things is their peers. Their peer group is so impactful. And it sounds like you have a preschooler. And
yes.
Do you see this with him? Like the things he'll eat at daycare, but he won't eat at home?
Most kids eat better at daycare in that age group because they're around people, because they all are told they have to sit down at the table. It is meal time. Sure, every meal that he's offered maybe isn't exactly what I would choose, but he gets a great amount of variety. So every day it is something different. It rotates. It's not every Tuesday is this or, every day it's mac and cheese. Like he gets things that I wouldn't serve at home for better or worse, but he gets to try new things, which is awesome. So I get to see and get a little report of, what is served that day. And I think it's really fun for him to get that exposure, and to see him eating with his friends is great.
So what about a child who chooses to skip lunch? I see this all the time. Or a child who's experiencing food insecurity who just simply can't afford it. What are they missing out on?
Yeah, well, luckily now, at least in this state, Minnesota is a free lunch state for everyone, regardless of if you have tons of money and can afford it or have nothing. Like there is no stigma, which is amazing. So hopefully that person feels like they can get the lunch. Now, plenty of kids still opt to not go through the line or eat for whatever reasons, anxiety or preference, right? They don't like what's being served and bring their own food. Lots of reasons they might skip it. It's like the worst thing that a child could do. Like, please don't skip your meals.
Yep.
Adults too, but kids definitely, like, don't skip your meals. If you're skipping your meal, your blood sugars are going to be lower, your attention's going to be lower, your overall energy is going to be lower. There's more likelihood that you're going to have like depressive thoughts or like mood disturbances because your body simply doesn't have the energy to keep up with the demands of your life. So whatever it is, just getting something in is going to be better than skipping the meal completely.
So the school lunch program does serve a variety of different types of lunches depending on where you're at. Can you give me some examples about what most kids are actually eating?
Milk. Most kids are choosing the milk.
Chocolate milk, you mean? Specifically?
Chocolate milk.
Yep.
Which is fine, right? It's a small container. Like, it's chocolate milk. Have some fun. But that is like the most consistency that I see in school lunches. There's such a big variety from school. Some schools do local food. Some schools have salad bars. Some schools have smoothie bars. Some schools, everyone has one option. You get your meatloaf, your mashed potato, your milk, your carrots, and you're done. Of course, there are some guidelines that, are put in place of what's served, but how schools interpret that and what actually makes it on the plate is up for interpretation, and it's a wide variety.
The research shows that school lunch does satisfy a lot of the dietary requirements for children, but one thing that they seem to have more of is added sugars, with milk being the most common source of added sugars, whether it's chocolate milk or strawberry milk or whatever the school is potentially serving. So is excess sugar in milk really something parents should be worried about?
You know, we would like to have less added sugars in a diet. Yep. The school lunches are working. I mean, there's not
Yeah.
much more to say about that. Like, yes, absolutely. They are working towards lowering that. So they do have some guidelines in place for 2025 and by 2027, which I know seems like a far way off, but these changes take a lot of time to happen.
Mhm.
Federal guidelines, it's always a work in progress with what we're learning, what we have the ability to do. Politics are definitely part of that.
Mhm.
But it's goes down to like the child's overall diet.
Yeah.
You know, I would rather see a higher quality bread than taking away added sugar from a chocolate milk. Chocolate milk, we know it's sweet, right? We
Mhm.
know it has chocolate added or a flavor added, but bread or ketchup or those foods that have those like hidden sugars, they don't scream sugar at us, but they have a lot of sugars or can potentially have a lot of sugars in them. So I would rather have the sweet foods be the sweet foods and the other foods, like, let's try to boost those up a little bit.
Is the average school lunch more nutritious, or is the average cold lunch, box lunch meal potentially more nutritious, or is it just completely independent on the child and family and what they're choosing?
Yep, that last part. So
Yeah.
I do diet recalls of children every day, and the variety is huge. You can have a really healthy, nutritious school lunch based on the child's desire, the parent's ability and time to pack it to what they have the ability to provide food-wise, expense-wise. You know, some kids bring leftovers, which is always sometimes great, right? They're getting more of a meal. Other kids can dump a pack of snacks and it's like 10 different components, right?
Yes.
So it really depends. And those snacks could be higher quality or not, but there's such a big variation. At least with the school lunch, they are getting some kind of guidance with how that plate should look and a standard of calories and nutrients. One other highlight that I think people miss is it becomes so common for lunches to be, and I think this is part of the bento box trend kind of took off, which is great. It's colorful, it's cute. But sometimes lunches have so many components in them, and that's just the norm, where I do see these children and there's 10 items they list off. And I'm like, school lunches, you get like 20 minutes.
Oh,
And
not
that
even.
is like
Yeah.
sitting down and talking to your friends, and you can't expect a child to consume all of those components. They're usually coming back home with like 50% of that lunch still in their lunchbox unconsumed. At least with the school lunch, it's more of a meal. Like there is a main meal component that a few bites gets more nutrients, more calories in than sometimes those lunches that have just too much going on, especially for our kids that have more anxiety. They're more distracted in the lunch setting, or they have higher nutrient needs. So I do encourage the parents at home who are packing lunches to try to focus on one meal type component. Doesn't have to be complex, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on whole grain or a turkey sandwich or something, and then maybe 2 extra components, the apple, the yogurt. Nice balanced lunch. It's easy and it can be consumed relatively quickly.
All of the parents out there are relieved to hear that, because I mean, go on Instagram and people are taking pictures of their kids, like Instagram worthy bento box with little shape cut out vegetables and fruits and all these things. And I'm like, that is amazing. Those people, those parents that are doing that are absolutely killing it. But I am not doing that.
It's impressive. I've definitely become guilty. And let me tell you, it can create a monster where my 3-year-old now wants airplane shaped pancakes in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And he knows how many engines should be on each
Why
wing.
wouldn't he want them?
Make it once and you're doomed for life.
Yes, exactly.
Pregnancy is an important time in our lives, full of thrills, unknowns, critical decisions, and big celebrations. You don't have to navigate any of those moments alone. In the book, you'll get the latest expertise from Mayo Clinic specialists, month-by-month chapters, milestones to watch for, and key steps in your prenatal care. Get your copy of Mayo Clinic Guide to a Healthy Pregnancy today at mcpress.mayoclinic.org and use code KIDS for 10% off your order. That's KIDS for 10% off your order.
I wouldn't mind an airplane-shaped pancake either, But let's get back to lunch. Like Lori said, what's most important at lunch is that kids are eating at all. School lunches are a time for kids to try new foods, learn eating habits from friends, and avoid mood swings. They need the nutrients and energy to make it through the rest of the day. If your kid favors the chocolate milk, that's okay. They're still getting plenty of nutrients. And while it can be high in sugar, federal guidelines for sodium and added sugars are on the way. What matters more is a kid's overall diet. A chocolate milk at lunch won't hurt them. There are too many factors to decide whether a packed lunch or a cafeteria meal is more nutritious. But for the most part, the key is to keep it simple. Lunch is too short to get complicated. But if you're packing a lunchbox, stick to around 3 items so your kid can get nourished without tossing out all your hard work. Now, let's talk about who decides what's for lunch and how schools can take their own spin on the rules. So, Lori, regarding the school lunch program, who decides or what are the guidelines that determine what is actually on that menu? How much of, whole grain servings and fat and sugar and vegetables and fruit servings need to be offered at each meal?
Yeah, so it is developed by the National School Lunch Program, and that is through the USDA. So it is federally developed and administered at that level. And, important to remember that over 30 million children take advantage of the school lunch, and that is huge. So they're responsible for a lot. And when you're responsible for such a large population, a lot of the nuance can get missed. So our fats, our proteins, our whole grains, right? Those are the boxes that we're looking to check to keep the general public healthy at that minimum level. So that's where kind of the school lunches takes off from. And then it's always being developed to kind of do better. Like half of the grains that are offered are supposed to be whole grains, or there's supposed to be a fruit or vegetable on the plate every day.
And are the lunches based on those guidelines able to meet the dietary needs of every kid?
I mean, what's being served is, again, going to be what's best for most people. And we know there's a huge amount of variety and individuality from person to person. Just stereotypically, if we're looking at like the football player who's super active and bigger, they're going to need more calories, right? And they're probably not getting as much of their needs met by the school lunches. Someone else who maybe is on the chess club, is a smaller person, right, is not utilizing overall calories and energy needs. There isn't an individual calorie guideline provided to kids, and we wouldn't want that. So there is a little bit of knowing your own child, and some schools do offer breakfast or sports programs for more snacks and fuel for those. But hopefully children are at least able to meet their hunger needs with the school lunch entree.
Okay, so you mentioned that our state of Minnesota now offers free breakfast and free lunch to all children. Is this a trend that we're seeing with other states?
Hopefully we'll see it pick up more and more. Right now, it's maybe 8 states that are doing this. So it is a relatively low percentage, and you can have individual feelings on that. But what it really does for that student is take away the stigma of free lunch. Because I know when I was in school, there was a stigma, there was kind of a definition attached to that. And maybe a child doesn't want, especially in like those teenage years where you do need more energy, they're might not want to be seen getting that school lunch for whatever social reason. And we have to keep in mind that food intake and school lunches are also a social experience and do a really good deal in shaping our food relationships. So by offering free school meals to everybody, it really takes away that stigma and allows everyone to be nourished, or everyone have the potential to be nourished without feeling any kind of shame from it.
Yeah. And I would add there's a large proportion of children in the United States that receive the majority of their nutrition throughout the day from the school. Breakfast and lunch may be the only meals that they're receiving, especially getting access to fresh fruits and vegetables and dairy products and other things like that. So, Lori, once federal guidelines are in place, how strict are those requirements? People often talk about the unexpected loopholes used to meet these guidelines.
Yeah. So loophole maybe isn't the best word, because those loopholes are actually stated in the guidelines. So they are written out as this is something that you can do. So for example, juice can meet, if it's 100% juice, it can meet 50% of the fresh fruit requirement or that fruit requirement for the week, depending on the school district, what they have available, staffing, everything. Sometimes pouring that cup of juice is their only option, and at least they're getting more nutrients. Is it maybe the best version? No, but again, we're getting there, at least they're getting something from it, and it is 50%. So it's not like your child can go and just get juice every day and that counts as their food. Another one that people do get hung up on is pizza is a vegetable or ketchup is a vegetable. Technically, a certain amount of tomato sauce can count as a vegetable. Again, is that really what we think of as a serving of vegetable? Maybe not, but hopefully we're doing better on other days. And if your child is more likely to eat pizza than they are to eat that like broccoli on the side, there is nutrients in tomato sauce. So again, it might not be the best, but it isn't the worst. Just like any kind of media headlines, salacious details, people tend to pick up on those little things way more than like, my child was served a whole grain piece of toast with broccoli at school lunch today, because that's boring and nobody wants to hear about that.
It does make for a less interesting story. So at a school level, what factors determine how they interpret guidelines?
So while the national program sets national limits, every school in every different location from a city to a rural area, they're going to look different, right? And that could be the number of students. There are very small schools that maybe have more staff to student ratios. There are very large schools cooking a very large amount of food in a short time to feed as many of the kids as we can or feed all the kids. There's different capacities, right? And the budgets of those schools, how big are they? How big is the kitchen? How many staff is in that kitchen? Are they better trained in like creating and chopping and, following recipes that meet these guidelines? And that could be a really big job. So like a school that maybe is in a more insecure area might not have the ability to have sharp knives to cut up fresh broccoli, where they might just have steamers that they can reheat things, right? So when we're looking at what is served, it really comes down to more than just the nutrition guidelines that are in place. It's also the school-to-school budget and the staffing abilities.
It's easy to focus on the food and the operations behind the scenes, but what other factors can get between a child and their lunch?
As adults, we value our food, right? Like I look forward to my lunch break, right? Not all kids do. They don't really see food as that vital component of their day. There are much more interesting, exciting things going on, right? There's gossip to hear about. There's homework to finish. So what happens in that lunch break can be focused on not eating. And in a lot of kids' minds, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they have that energy to kind of get through the day. Doesn't mean that it's good. It doesn't mean that that's the right way to do it. So we really want to push more on setting a good food environment. That's a big part of being able to consume more is, we all preach like at dinner, family dinner at the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like the best way to do it. Well, lunches too, right? We want to have the kids in a quieter environment, sitting around the table with each other, eating their food. That's not always what happens.
So here's the process for school lunches. The National School Lunch Program sets nutritional guidelines. Those can include having a variety of vegetables, having whole grains, encouraging larger portions for fruits, etc. It's a system that's constantly evolving and varies from school to school in terms of how the guidelines are enacted. There are national guidelines, and then there are the rules at the state level. Most states require schools to have a free or reduced lunch option. About 8 states offer free lunch for all, because the point is to reduce stigma and keep kids fed, especially the kids who get the majority of their nutrients from school meals. Then schools do their best to fulfill those guidelines, depending on their budgets and staff. Sure, sometimes those nutrients can come from apple juice or tomato sauce on pizza, but remember, that's within the guidelines, so schools can make the best use of limited resources. It's obviously not a perfect system at most schools, and kids already have homework, school stress, and social obligations on their plate. So let's explore what parents can do to make sure their kids are getting the best lunch possible. So, what does a successful school lunch program look like?
more kids eating more of the meal, less food going in the trash, right? So that's the basic version of success, feeding more children so they can meet their energy and nutrient needs. Beyond that, trying to involve more of the local environment, especially here in Minnesota, we have so much great farming. And so taking advantage of that more. And that also goes beyond the food intake, right? It connects the food to your environment, thoughtfulness, maybe. There are certain programs that have chefs and cooking classes. And again, having that salad bar where they can serve themselves and interact more with the food is really important. So I think there are endless possibilities. It's just, how can we get more schools to be able to focus on more than just meeting the nutrient requirements?
Mm-hmm. I agree there. When I got the honor of getting to chaperone my kids' 3-day trip to this environmental learning center, a really cool thing that they had is that the kids had to weigh their waste at the end, right? There was a competition between classes about who had more waste. One other thing I found really, really cool in that program is that the kids were out exercising before lunchtime. Do we know anything about how exercising before lunch can improve the eating habits of kids at lunchtime?
When you exercise first, it's kind of like a sensory dump. So especially when kids are cooped up, they've been sitting for a while, they are kind of mentally running wild. We need them to physically run wild a little bit too and get that activity out there so they can come back to the lunchroom more settled. They come back feeling like they can sit in quiet and peace. And then whether it affects the appetite, depending on how much they ran around and how much they burned. And that is kind of, I think, a little bit more nuanced. I think the bigger effect it has is on just kind of calming the system and going into a meal feeling like you're ready to sit down and receive a meal.
What are your thoughts on access to sugary beverages or energy drinks that children may have at school?
When we're talking about added sugar in that chocolate milk, you're getting vitamin D, you're getting calcium. There are more nutrients. You're getting some fat and some carbohydrates and protein. When we look at a soda that's coming out of that vending machine, you are only getting added sugar. You are getting no nutrition added to that. And if anything, it's fooling your body into think you're consuming something, right? When we're talking about those small windows for eating, if you're also drinking that 20-ounce bottle of soda and trying to eat your meal, they're competing for room, for time. So I would like to see those not be a part of the schoolroom at all.
What can parents do to advocate for healthy options?
I think always feel like you are part of your school district, right? You can go and talk and have these conversations. Most schools are very receptive to hearing ideas. They might not be able to implement every idea that every parent would like to see, and at the most basic level, if you have the time and the ability, put a lunch together. Your child can bring a lunch. They don't have to rely on school meals. So if you feel a certain way about whatever is being offered and you want to stay away from that, well, let's put a lunch together that your child will eat and that you guys will all feel good about.
If it's an option, do you have an opinion on whether they should pack their kids' lunch or have them grab food from the cafeteria?
I think it comes down to that child's needs. If a child has certain dietary needs or preferences that are a little beyond just picky, that feel better about bringing a lunch with them, excellent, let's do that. If you are a parent who has the ability and the desire to put something together that is super nutritious, that your child is going to eat, then do that. Absolutely. And I always encourage parents, whatever end of that spectrum they're on, to have that kind of emergency lunch packed, whether it's just that whole grain, peanut butter jelly, a yogurt and apple sitting there. That can sit in the fridge all week and be fine, or go into their backpack or some of those shelf stable yogurt things in case that lunch meal that's being offered is something your kid is not going to eat. And then they're at school looking at that food like, I'm just going to go hungry. They shouldn't have to. There is a backup meal that is in their bag or locker that they can still consume and get some nutrients out of.
Okay. So let's go back to what you said before. They don't need to pack a bento box full of 10 different items and foods. What are the basics that they should be including in that packed lunch?
So you want to have something that's giving a significant amount of calories. So if you're just packing the pirate's booty and the applesauce pouch, that together is like 150 calories. Like that is nothing, right? Think about how much time it takes for a smaller child to like eat all of those little pirate booties and suck down that it is time consuming.
Yeah.
So we want to make something that's a little bit more dense. So focus on something that is more of an entree. So a sandwich, turkey and cheese. Maybe if you can throw some lettuce on there, or spinach, if you can sneak that in, or some hummus, great. But try to make it like that one item. Or maybe it's a bean and egg burrito that you are able to take, or some pasta salad, or whatever you can make in that one like main meal component. And then try to pick like 2 extra sides. We want to get a fruit or vegetable in there, and maybe a dairy component if they're not grabbing that milk, maybe a yogurt or a string cheese. So try to make sure that there's a carb, fat, protein, there's some fiber in there from a fruit, vegetable.
Yeah, that sounds great. So in reality, though, as a parent, we sometimes get to decide what they eat. They decide how much of what they eat. That should be like the tenet. That's what I preach. I'm sure that's what you preach. Mm-hmm. How can parents kind of help in a really balanced and non-malignant sort of way teach their kid how to make balanced and healthy choices for their lunch and not make it turn into a shaming game or a blame game or create an eating disorder?
Yes, I feel like parents stress the most when it comes to food. Food kind of hits at the heartstrings, and every parent is worried about like how to toe that line. Division of power is what you're alluding to. So caregiver has the job to offer a good amount of food in whatever quality they can. You put it on the plate. Your child has the ability, in my child's case, to throw it on the floor or to get some in his mouth, right? So we can't force feed, but we can encourage, we can offer options. There's nothing wrong with saying, do you want the turkey sandwich or the peanut butter sandwich? They're 2 really good options. So feel good about providing options, getting input from your child, letting them make some decisions. If I say, do you want broccoli or peas? Do I care which one he chooses? No. Absolutely not. Like, choose one. Great. Yes. We're going to put one on the plate and you're going to feel good because you chose it, right? Sometimes just choosing the star shape or the heart shape or the lunchbox they're using, like those non-food items can go a long way. And the biggest thing that you can do as a parent, one, offer variety, hands down. The more variety that you are exposing your child to throughout their younger years, the better outcomes in how they're going to be able to navigate making healthful choices when they're older. And the other one is role modeling. If a parent is downing a protein shake and skipping breakfast and not sitting down for meals or never eats a vegetable, how do you expect your child to do that? Or why would you expect your child to not follow suit? Parents, you're the example, so we're going to eat that broccoli together.
Like you said, it tugs at our heartstrings as parents. We're always worried if our kid's growing and getting enough. But there's so many other opportunities throughout the daytime to get in different types of nutrition. It doesn't all fall down to one meal, and every meal doesn't need to be perfect. So what about after-school snacks? Does that seem like an opportunity where you can sneak in some of these food groups?
Absolutely, especially for those kids who are like maybe only eating 50% of that lunch, right? What happens to that other 50%? If you packed it, it's still in your bag, hopefully. You're not just like trashing it. So eat it after school, on the bus while you're waiting, or before that practice that you're, waiting to get started at. We need to be having regular meals throughout the day. Children have smaller stomachs. They can only have smaller amounts of food at a time. So increasing the frequency of eating is important. And especially when lunches in some classes or schools are at like 10:30 in the morning, right? And maybe the bus doesn't come till 3 p.m. Right. That is a long window. We definitely want to be having a snack to keep our energy levels high and to get in some extra nutrients. So something that can be shelf stable, that can sit in the backpack all day, that healthy whole grain granola bar, or maybe it's one of those like fruit pouches with some nut or seed butter added into it for some healthful fats, or some trail mix, right? Or that other half of the peanut butter jelly sandwich, which I'm pretty sure can sit in the bottom of a backpack for like a month and probably still be okay.
I know it did in my time.
Right? Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Lori. It's definitely 5 o'clock on Friday.
Right? Let's go home.
Lunch has many factors that are out of our control as parents. but we do have some tools within reach to give our kids the best lunch possible. Maybe you can make your opinions known at the school district, advocating for food waste education or a ban on soda machines. Maybe you can pack a lunch for your kid or give them a weekly just-in-case lunch to stash in their locker. Maybe you can target a significant amount of calories in their lunchbox, making sure to include carbs, fat, protein, dairy, and fiber. And of course, it's not all on you. Give kids the power to choose their food so they feel involved. Remember, the most impactful thing that you can do is expose them to a variety of foods and model healthy eating yourself. Kids need support from school and home to form healthy eating habits that will last a lifetime. That's all for this episode. But if you have a question or a topic suggestion, you can leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272. We might even feature your voice on the show. For more Mayo Clinic Kids episodes and resources, check out our website at mayoclinic.org/kids. Okay, thanks for listening.
Have you ever wondered how artificial intelligence is helping solve medical problems, or how medical research is making it easier to predict your genetic risks for disease? Hi, I'm Kathy Wurzer. Tomorrow's Cure, a podcast from Mayo Clinic and PRX, is back for Season 2. Join me as I interview experts who are shaping the future of healthcare with groundbreaking advancements. What they describe may sound futuristic, but listen and you'll find out. Tomorrow's Cure is already here. Find it now wherever you get your podcasts.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as medical or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for any medical questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement of or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.